Hey guys, welcome back to another Late Night Strange. And tonight, hopefully you guys enjoyed this 1 hour special of all the Bigfoot videos that I ever made. And I kind of montage it all together in one, because who doesn't like a 1 hour special of Bigfoot stories? So without further ado, let's get started. What is a Bigfoot, one may ask? Bigfoot is often described as a large, muscular, bipedal ape or human-like creature covered in black, dark brown, or reddish darkish hair. Those who have seen this creature have reported them to be at least 6 to 9 feet tall. On rare occasions, some even said they were 10 to 15 feet tall. So according to Life Science, there's been over 10,000 reported sightings in the United States alone. And that is just what they documented. Imagine all the undocumented sightings where people are afraid to come out and tell the world or people that they know that they've seen Bigfoot because they're afraid of being labeled crazy or nuts. But for those of you who has been listening to a lot of Sasquatch podcasts or just even, looking up in YouTube channels and stuff like that, sometimes, in a couple episodes, these podcasters will come out and say there are a lot of credible images, videos that never surface on the internet because these people, they have families of Bigfoot or Bigfoot living on their land and they don't want to make it public because they're afraid that people might track where they are and come and pretty much harass these Bigfoots off their land and pretty much just chase them out. So a lot of these people that live out in the rural areas that own hundreds of acres are usually pretty hush-hush about this topic. But of course, somebody always needs somebody to talk to that 100% believes them. And those who will hear them out are these podcasters and YouTubers. One of the most famous films out there is known as the Patterson-Gimlin film, recorded in October 20th, 1967 by Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin.
I rode across the creek. I got off the horse and took my rifle out of the scabbard in case I had to make a shot. She made that turn to look. Kept right on walking. She went on up out of sight up that canyon. All this time I'm thinking, holy mackerels, these things do exist.
They recorded a Bigfoot walking through the woods. It's about 59 seconds long, where you see this female Bigfoot walking and takes a look back at them. And this video right now still being very highly analyzed and very scrutinized, and still a debated subject today, saying whether it was a fake video or real. Real or not, this video evidence has been one of the most profounding footage we have of Bigfoot if this creature really exists. After the release of this film, there has been a lot of hoax that followed with it.
This is as real as you're standing right where you are, sir.
And say they stuffed the Bigfoot carcass in a freezer and for an undisclosed amount handed over the frozen creature. But after some thawing, all that was left, a rubber gorilla outfit. Calls to the two men about their fake discovery haven't been returned. Mike Gracia, The Associated Press.
Even though some of these hoax that happens in the United States has been proven to be a hoax, you cannot dismiss the reports that happens all around the world. Picture this. Just imagine this. Over 10,000 reports in the United States alone. There's so much other reportings outside of the United States. Even if one of those reports were real, that means that Bigfoot really does exist. So we know this creature as Bigfoot, but the Native Americans, they called him Sasquatch, also known as Wild Man. In the United States alone, there are over 100 names for this creature. It all depends which region you're from, which tribe, where you grew up, and the stories that follows these creatures. So I'm just gonna give you guys an example. Down in Florida, they call it the skunk ape. Skunk ape pretty much lives in the Everglades. You can smell it before you see it. They have a skunky odor that burns your nostril, and they are super dirty. But in Georgia, they call them the woolly booger. Minnesota, they call him the Iceman. North Dakota, they call him the Mad Monster. It just goes on and on and on. The one creature that I really want to talk about is called the rock ape of Vietnam. And this creature lives close to my heart because my dad have always talked about this creature when he was back in Laos. Believe it or not, there's actually two different types of species that my dad always talked about when he lived back in Laos. One was the rock ape, which in my culture they call it the Marlu. The other one is actually more of a spiritual being or a magical being or a magical Bigfoot that has supernatural powers. That one is pretty much a strange side of Bigfoot that nobody likes talking about, and that is what they call the Pinot Vai. So let's talk a little bit about the rock apes, where soldiers were reported to have seen ape-like creatures when fighting in the country's dense jungle during the Vietnam-American War. They were known to the American troops as rock apes, and stories about them came in by the hundreds. In fact, so many rock ape stories came from one single location that it became known as the Monkey Mountain. And the crazy thing about that is Vietnam has no native apes within its borders. And the locals known about these creatures, which what they call batututs, or jungle people, describe as hairy ape-like muscular humanoids. Believe it or not, it wasn't just the US troops that was reporting these encounters with the rock apes, but Viet Cong troops alike told stories about being attacked by creatures that were human-like, have 5 inches long fang, and the ability to climb the terrain steep rocks with ease. They further described them to having red hair, ape-like features, and to often have their babies with them. Batutus were also said to be about 6 feet tall, have long limbs, protruding stomachs, and to live in packs. The interesting thing was they earned their name not for living on rocks, however, but because they threw rocks. Usually in response after rocks were thrown at them first, the primates would then launch the rocks back at the unsuspected soldiers, earning their name the rock apes.
The rainforests of Asia harbor many stories of strange encounters. 1,000 miles north of Malaysia, deep in the jungles of Laos, exists what many believe is a relative of America's legendary Bigfoot. The year was 1966. America's at war with Vietnam. For the first time ever, U.S. soldiers are faced with full-scale jungle warfare. As military missions take forces deep into the heart of the Indochinese forest, extraordinary stories begin to filter back from the field. Stories about encounters with strange creatures. As a young soldier in Vietnam in 1969, veteran Tom Jacobs was often sent on reconnaissance missions into the thick jungle. One day, though, he witnessed something he will never forget.
We really didn't know what it was. It sounded like the North Vietnamese were attacking us with tanks.
A band of large primates began throwing rocks at his platoon.
I had heard that there had been previous problems with what we called rock apes, and in fact at one point a band of them threw one Marine off the rock pile, and so we were wary of them without a doubt.
What Sergeant Jacobs had seen may have been any one of a number of primate species which inhabit the Indochinese forest. But several times, he says, they came face to face with a creature that was entirely different.
This animal was stockier. He was of darker color, a lot more muscular. This different creature would, early in the morning, burst out of the jungle into a clearing and just rail at us, just yell and scream and shake his fists. And it was very human behavior, and it was real obvious that he took exception to our presence there.
During the Vietnam War, it wasn't only American soldiers who had run-ins with what appeared to be a type of Bigfoot. On the North Vietnamese side, there were also bizarre reports of a strange creature attacking soldiers in the jungle.
Before all the reports and all the sightings about the rock apes that came out after the Vietnam War, during bedtime, my dad would always tell us these stories about these Marlu ape-like creatures. They would stand outside of somebody's house, or they would stand nearby trails where people would walk by, especially deep in the woods, because most of the gardens are 2 to 3 hours away from where people live. So a lot of times these villagers would take these small little trails to go to the garden, and that's where these Marlu would sit there and just wait for villagers to walk by. What they would do is they'll grab them right in the arms, look up to the skies, and just stares and just laughs and just kind of wait to see if there's any signs saying that they can't eat this person. Most of the time, the stories are told that if there was a lightning or a thundercloud coming through, they will let that person go and they just kind of disappear back into the woods. But if they didn't see any signs of thunderstorm or any storm coming through, they will eat them right then and there. This happened so much to the point where the villagers have to come out with a solution. What they did was they came out with these bamboo sleeves that they will wear every single time when they come out of the house or when they're walking to their gardens, because these bamboo sleeve acts like a escaping device where they could just slip out of it easily and start running for their lives. It is said that if you are being chased by these malu or rock apes, since they have locked knees, you want to run in a zigzag pattern through the woods or run uphill. If you run downhill, you're pretty much dead. And growing up, hearing all these stories, I thought it was just folklores or bedtime stories, until the accounts of rock apes came out after the Vietnam War. The craziest thing about this is the GIs went into Vietnam War thinking that they're just going to be fighting the Viet Congs and the Red Laos, but they ended up fighting 3 enemies, which one of them were rock apes. And if you don't believe me, just look up the rock ape encounters or just watch the documentary about the rock apes and comb through the comments. There's so much accounts of people's grandfathers or grandparents telling them about encounters with the rock apes. It makes you wonder why between 1965 and 1975, why the United States dropped more than 7.5 million tons of bombs in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia alone. Pretty much double the amount they dropped in Europe and Asia during World War II. I understand that the Viet Cong had a lot of tunnels that they dig throughout the jungles as surprise attacks and booby traps. Just think about that. 7.5 million tons of bombs just dropped in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia alone. Were they trying to get rid of something else? I don't know. Imagine going to battle thinking you're going to be fighting another human, but ended up running upon monsters. If you ask me, that makes a perfect Hollywood movie. The idea of Bigfoot and rock apes attacking and eating humans isn't a fairy tale. Those of you who have been following David Paulides' Missing 411 knows that a lot of these strange cases of people going missing in national forests has a lot of correlation with Bigfoot sightings. To those of you who don't know who David Paulides is or the Missing 411 cases, David Paulides is a former police officer who is now an investigator and a writer known for primarily his self-published book dedicated to proving the reality of Bigfoot. That is what he did back then, but now dedicates his time to pretty much research these missing cases of people that have gone missing in national forests, parks, or around the world. In his Missing 411 books, he doesn't come out and say Bigfoot did it, but the more you read and the more you listen to these stories, there's a lot of resemblance of eyewitness accounts seeing these creatures carrying little kids and running them off through the woods. There's even these cases where search and rescue teams have found these kids weeks later and have pretty much asked them, like, where were you this whole time? And then these kids will come out and say, the fuzzy man took care of me, or a bear man took care of me, you know, and they were fed berries and stuff like that. And it's just a interesting read, and it just blows your mind once you get into the rabbit hole with the Missing 411 series. But these were the cases where the kids or the person was found. Majority of the time, those people who go missing are never recovered, or else, you know, they were found 1 or 2 years later and they have already passed away. So highly recommend for anybody who likes strange and weird stuff. But my take on it is I started reading all this stuff and just pretty much digesting everything in the Missing 411. And a lot of these cases happen near limestone or places that have cave systems. So I started pretty much piecing those two things together and then looking at all the Bigfoot encounters, and at the same time looking at all the missing accounts throughout the United States. And what I found is such a similarity between 3 maps. One map where people gone missing. Another map is where all the Bigfoot sightings have happened. And then another map where cave systems and limestone have been found. And if you just look at those 3 maps and combine them together, you're going to see so much similarities. So the stories my dad always told me about Marlu or rock apes eating humans Me personally, I wouldn't dismiss that for the cases that happens in the Missing 411 series. I'm just gonna jump right into some of these stories of Bigfoot attacks and kidnappings. And of course, we're gonna jump right into the Mount St. Helens account, or also known as Ape Canyon. For those of you who don't know about the Ape Canyon account, so in the summer of 1924, a group of gold prospectors stumbled out of the woods, shaking and glass-eyed, to tell a 7-foot-tall ape-like creature or animal attacking them with boulders. So a group of guys described coming upon Gorilla Man near where they had built a small cabin for their gold prospecting. They claimed that they were 8 miles from Spirit Lake when they encountered 4 of these giant animals moving through the forest with erect human-like strides. They were covered in all long black hair, and their ears were about 4 inches long and stick straight up. They have 4 toes, short and stubby. The witness estimated each animal weighed about 400 pounds. They even captured a photo of one of these creatures. But the story really begins when one of them fired their rifle at one of these creatures and struck it 3 times. The wounded animal then toppled off a cliff. But the violence that the men shown to these creatures proved to be a huge mistake. Because that night, the men said they were awakened when huge stones began clobbering outside of their cabin. Then they heard and felt giant bodies slamming against the walls and doors. The 8 men-like creatures were out for revenge. The creatures eventually tore a hole in the roof, allowing them to target the person that shot one of their own. Many of the rocks fell through the hole of the roof, and 2 of the rocks struck the person that shot one of their own more than once, rendering him unconscious for nearly 2 hours. After a long night of these creatures slamming their bodies against the cabin and throwing rocks into that little hole, the men said the sun began to come up, which prompted the animals or creatures to break off their attacks and slipped away. The men then poked their heads out of the door, and when they decided the coast was clear, they booked it out of the woods. Tales of giant 8 men-like creatures in Mount St. Helens weren't exactly new to the area. Hunters, lumberjacks, and prospectors have seen massive footprints now and again over the years, and the Native Americans in the area have spoken about the mountain devils. But a few people seriously worried about the possibility of huge unknown creatures being out there in the forest. But of course, all that changed when these gold prospectors returned back to the village that summer in 1924 and told of the story of their battle with these large human-like beasts that terrified them all night long. Another one of these accounts that happened in 1924 involved a man known as Albert Oldsman, a lumberjack and a woodsman. He went to an area for a vacation. Oldsman had actually heard stories about the man-beasts or the mountain devils who supposedly roamed these woods but refused to believe them. As he was sleeping one evening, he reported or claimed that a Sasquatch picked him up and carried him off while he was still in his sleeping bag. He also said that he was carried across country for 3 hours by the Sasquatch. The Sasquatch dropped Oldsman down in a plateau. Standing around him was a family of 4 of these creatures. He then claimed that he was kept captive by the Sasquatch. The captors were 2 adults and 2 children, which held Oldsman captive for 6 days. One of the Bigfoots was reported to be at least 8 feet tall. Of course, Oldsman did not use his gun on them as they had done no harm to him, so he stayed with the Bigfoot family for a week. He also ate sweet-tasting grass that they gave him. According to Oldsman, the female Sasquatch washed and stacked leaves. So Albert claimed that he escaped his Bigfoot family by making the large male Sasquatch groggy by feeding him some snuff. And for those of you who don't know what snuff is pretty much tobacco mixed with menthol or whichever flavor you prefer. And what it is you just sniff it and that's it. And it kind of gives you this nicotine kick in your nostrils. For Albert, he didn't tell his story to anybody for more than 24 years. Just, for the fear of people labeling him as a crazy man. So as more and more Sasquatch stories came out and was in the press, Albert decided to tell his story to a local newspaper. Even till this day, Albert's story has been very criticized, and a lot of people has pretty much came out and said there's not enough evidence for Albert to even prove that his story is real, and it was just, more likely the result of his imagination. And of course, I have to always mention the missing 411 cases, even though David Paulides doesn't come out and say that Bigfoot was pretty much the culprit, or the ones kidnapping children, women, or just anybody in general, especially in these national forests. But if you look past the missing 401 cases, and especially look at the First Nation, all their stories, there's a lot of similarities in that itself. So I'll tell you guys a story about the Indians of British Columbia. So they have numerous stories and myth, folklores, just pretty much stories of giants inhabiting forests and mountains. And these have different names according to the local language. And of course, we all know the name Sasquatch, which means wild man. But there's also a name in their language called the Chunaquas, which are the wild women in the woods. The stories of the Chunaquas is pretty terrifying. Most of these stories and legends pretty much revolves around children's. And it's said that if you were really naughty, the Chunaqua, or also known as the wild woman of the woods, she carries a basket and she will dance. And then if you were naughty, she will come and pick you up, throws you in a basket, and pretty much takes you all the way up in the mountains, up in the woods. And if you were still naughty, then the Chunaqua will eat you then and there. But if you were, behaving, or if you were good, then the Chunaqua will release you back. So it was kind of told as a story to keep kids in a good behavior mode. So let's jump back into some of these stories or some of these legends that were told by these Native Americans that live in British Columbia. They also believe that there's giants that live in caves or crude huts in far off places, high up in the mountains or deep in the woods. They are looked upon as huge human-like beings with dark hairy bodies, black faces, and big feet. With the strong smell emanating from their bodies is sometimes mentioned, but their size varies from twice of that of a man to higher than that of the highest trees in the forest. So although some of those myths and giants, figures appear aggressive and dangerous, killing people and devouring people, they are usually depicted as interested in keeping their captives alive to communicate with them. These stories also told that these giants would steal women from these Indian villages. The story that was told was a woman was held captive and taught all the giants how to make fire and how to catch and cook fish. She spent so much time there, she even married one of these giants. So they were so grateful that they allowed her and her giant husband to go and help her people hunt. But stories of Sasquatch kidnapping girls doesn't just revolve around the Native Americans in British Columbia. Stories of Sasquatch kidnapping girls also comes from the Paiute tribes. But the story goes, the Mono Lake Paiute girls were out gathering berries in the northern parts of the Yosemite National Park, when suddenly one of the girls who was on the edge of the meadows by the tree was heard screaming. The girls ran over there as one of the girls went to call the men. There was no trace of that girl at all, so she had just completely vanished. The people believed that she was taken by a grizzly bear, or some spirit had captured her. At the camp, the family cried and was pretty much inconsolable, but the people had to go on. The next day, the people started up the hill to trek along the Sierra. While trekking along, they heard a girl crying and upset, yelling nonsensical things. She was moving her hands wildly and pointing back to the wooded area. She told the people that as she was picking berries along the meadow by the edge of the forest when a Bigfoot, or also known as the Pahizoho, came out behind a tree and grabbed her. He was big, reddish, and hairy, and she screamed and screamed and screamed as he carried along off into the forest, and she thought for sure she was going to get eaten by him. But instead, he took her into the bushes, forced himself on her. She said he stunk so bad that it was making her sick and it was extremely painful. She also mentioned that he didn't talk at all, he just grunted all the time. She was too scared to look at him, but could see his reddish big hand and hairy legs and feet, and that even his feet had hair on them. They didn't look human. She also said that after a while he just went to sleep. And that was when the Bigfoot-like creature pretty much let go of his grip, and that's when she made her escape. As she joined her tribe and went back to the village, one thing that happened was later on they found out that she was actually showing signs of pregnancy. During that time, the people stayed clear of her except for her friends and family. 9 months later, she actually had a son that had a lot of red hair and was also very hairy. The people actually were scared at first, and some of the men actually wanted to kill the baby, but the girl's mother prevented them. Later on, the people actually accepted the boy into their group because he was actually a really good hunter and had uncanny natural abilities of sight and smell, and was also very strong. He then married and had children come out looking a little bit more normal, but every now and then, one of the descendants come out hairy and with red hair. Many of the descendants are now scattered in many parts of the Paiute tribes in California and Nevada. There's also photos of these Native Americans with abnormally long fingers compared to their palms. There's also an unusual amount of hair on their legs and chests of the men. One perhaps seems to have hair that resembles a different color other than black, perhaps reddish. Whether these photos were actually descendants of the Paiute tribes or just another tribe in the Native Americans, legends of these Bigfoot kidnappings, children and women just don't end there at the Paiute tribes. There's actually more stories of this out there, and I'll tell you one that's very sinister that comes from the people of Choctaw. So the Choctaw territory was actually in southeast Oklahoma, which is ground zero for Bigfoots in Oklahoma. The Bigfoots, only referred to as giants, has been raiding human settlements on southeast Oklahoma and Arkansas for some time, mostly stealing vegetables. They have also been stealing human children and apparently eating them. A Choctaw search party was actually organized and led by Joshua LaFleur. This was actually a real person, so he was actually born in the Choctaw Nations in 1796 and died in Indian Territory in 1855. So whether this story was actually real or fake, there's been reports of Joshua actually forming a party to go search down these Bigfoots that has been kidnapping these children. So upon tracking these Bigfoots, they come upon this huge giant mound that had 19 children bodies on it that has been reportedly eaten by these Bigfoots. And while coming upon this mound, they were actually approached by two Bigfoots, and without hesitation, Joshua opens up his revolver at one of them, but it proved to be useless. Even before he could, reload, the Bigfoot kills Joshua with a single blow, then tears off his head, as reported. Back in the days, the Choctaw Indians were actually equipped with 50 caliber sharp buffalo rifles, and what they believed was if they were to shoot in the head, they would kill the beast, and that's exactly what they did. They opened up on one of them, killing that one instantly, and then the one that actually killed Joshua took off running. So the Choctaw Indians then hunted down that Bigfoot that killed Joshua and finished it off with the hunting knife. As reported, they then decapitated the Bigfoot for good measures, just to kind of get that revenge for Joshua. So I'm not quite sure if this story is actually real or not, but just going through all the comments and stuff like that, some of the people from the Choctaw Nation do acknowledge that, even though the story might have just been kind of exaggerated, a lot of these kidnappings and stealing of human children actually, did happen. Soon after the battle, the Indians actually buried what's left of the kids and then buried their later Joshua, giving him 21 gun salute, then making a bonfire and burning all of the Bigfoot remains in it. But that was one of many stories that came out of Choctaw Nation. But no matter which tribe you ask, I know there's maybe a few of them out there that don't believe in Sasquatch. But we all know that the Native Americans have talked about these creatures for centuries. So let's go back to that one story where that Paiute girl was kidnapped by that reddish-haired Bigfoot and had a baby. So I'm not quite sure how close you guys follow any of the updates of Bigfoot, reportings or sightings or even DNA testing. But yeah, I said it, DNA testing. For those of you guys who don't know, a lot of these Bigfooters, they'll go out and they'll cast these footprints of these Bigfoots, and alongside with that, they'll find hair samples. And most of these hair samples will be sent to Melba Ketchum, who is a DNA diagnostic located in Texas. But back in 2012, indicated that Bigfoot is a hybrid from over 15,000 years ago that was in between of a human woman and an unknown primate. So this claim in itself actually made national news. It was also suggested that such cryptids had sex with modern human females that resulted in hairy hominid hybrids. So in Melba Ketchum's own words, that our data indicated that the North American Sasquatch is a hybrid species. The results of males of an unknown Homo species crossing with the female Homo sapiens. And a lot of you guys are probably wondering how these tests were actually done. Well, let me tell you. So the study, which used 111 samples of alleged Bigfoot hair, blood, mucus, toenail, bark scrapings, salivas, and skin with hair on there that has tissue attached, were collected by dozens of people from 34 sites all around North America. Hairs were compared to reference samples from common animals like human, dog, horses, cows, deers, elks, moose, and etc. All these samples that were collected did not match any of these following animals or humans. And because of that, there was a theory that came out saying that human DNAs could have easily transferred or contaminated these samples by simply coughing on it, sneezing on it, or just having a drop of spit on it. To rule out that theory, they also went out and took DNA samples of these of the people who actually brought in these samples, just to make sure that their own DNA helped rule out any contamination. But the possibility of DNA contamination by others, such as hunters or hikers, could not be ruled out at this point. So going back to the story of the Paiute girl that was kidnapped by the Bigfoot creature with the reddish hair, I mean, make it what you want, but a lot of these folklores and these stories that comes from our Native American tribes are, they do tell a very, very detailed story that could actually be true, that has been passed down from generations and generations. So that's why I believe a lot of these folklores and legends do have some truth in them. Another Bigfoot creature that we're going to be talking about is called the Nantinak of Alaska, or also known as the Bigfoot creature that made residents flee from Portlock, Alaska. Around the 1940s, it was reported that several Dall sheep hunters had disappeared in the hills outside of Portlock. It was also stated in 1973 in an article from Anchorage Daily News that dismembered bodies of some of the missing had washed up ashore in the lagoons. These events led the residents of the community to flee in masses, and the town's post office officially closed between 1950 to 1951. Many other villagers blamed the unexplained deaths and disappearances on the Bigfoot-like creature referred to local as the Nantinak. So this Nantinak creature was known to be a huge Bigfoot-like creature with supernatural powers. But the story just gets a lot more bizarre than that. Let's talk about some of the deaths that happened in 1930s in Portlock, Alaska. So there was a mysterious death in 1931 when a logger named Andrew Camlock, it appeared that he had been hit over the head with a huge piece of logging equipment, something that a man could not even have lifted or swung. So when they found his body, there was blood on the crane and he was a good 10 feet from it. It looked as if someone or something picked it up and bunked him over the head and tossed the heavy equipment aside. That was the first mysterious death that happened. Then in the 1940s, a truly terrifying event unfolded. It is said that over the next 20 years that 36 grossly mangled bodies had turned up along the trails, rivers, and even floating out in the bay. These bodies were said to be completely mutilated and essentially torn to shreds, not resembling anything that a bear or wolf, could do or would do. It got so bad to the point where cannery workers refused to come to work one season and were begged to return the following season with promises of armor guards protecting the camp around the clock. Hunters that were tracking moose would occasionally come across giant man-like tracks over 18 inches in length. There was even one report where a hunter that was closing up upon a moose, he saw signs of where the grass had been malted down and seemed like there was a struggle going around, and then he saw these deep human-like man-like tracks departing towards the high mountains. So in 1949, that is when the locals grew sick and tired of living in fear of this terrorizing Sasquatch. So overnight, they all fled town and completely left everything behind, even all their possessions. During that time, there was about 31 residents that were reported to up and left, but that is not counting the ones that were found deceased. There was a lot of theories pointing fingers saying that it might have just been a serial killer, but for a serial killer to kill 36 people and bunk somebody over the head with a crane and just goes in the forest and howls all night long and just terrorize the town, I don't know, man. There's something else going on there, but what we know is, monster or not, people have abandoned Portlock, Alaska for that reason. And with that, that reminds me of the Pinot that my dad always talked about back in the days. This Pinot creature is known to be evil and mischievous and could teleport and could disguise as one of your friends if you guys were to go camping together. It is also known to mimic voices in the woods. So let's say that if you were nearby the edge of the woods, you would hear this distraught voice of one of your family members, and when you get closer and closer and closer, you find out that it is not your family members, it's just something else mimicking the voice so it could lure you to the forest to eat you. And that is what the Pinot is, a spiritual being or spiritual ape-like creature that feeds on human and is pretty much evil, but it has all the features of a Bigfoot in his natural form. Those that have been reported to seeing this creature says sometimes they are about 3 to 4 feet tall and even report them to be at least 7 to 8 feet tall. So a lot of resemblance with the American Bigfoot, but they have supernatural powers. And that is what this Nantinak reminded me of. Now let's talk about the creature known as Pinot, one of the most feared creatures or cryptid in the Hmong culture. So the Pinot is a creature in Hmong folklore that has been reported to be a shape-shifting Bigfoot that stands roughly around 4 to 6 feet tall. It is an ape-like creature that has jet black hair with a red belly. It's mainly reported to have a protruding stomach and very bulky. This creature has been seen majority of the time when the man goes out hunting and stays in the jungles overnight, or on the trails when the woman comes back from the gardens up in the mountains. Pinot is also known in our culture to be supernatural and can shapeshift, appear and disappear within the blink of an eye, create storms by howling, and mimic the voices of your friends and family to lure you into the forest. They are always seen by themselves in many parts of the jungles. That's why we believe the Pinot is the guardian of the forest, and each one protects different sections of the land. The man that goes out to the forest for many days to hunt usually comes back with bone-chilling stories of these creatures. Those who make it back to tell the stories, at least. That is why there are strict rules put in place today, as we still use it in modern times. So those rules are, if you ever go to the forest, always go in even numbers. The thought behind this is as long as each person has a partner, you'll be fine from any spiritual attachments or cryptid attachments that will follow you home. Whether it be shadow people, Pinot little people, or what we call punzong, if you decide to sleep in the forest, always sleep in a triangle or away from each other if you go in odd numbers. There's always been many cases out there where hunters will sleep side by side, and in the middle of the night, the person that sleeps in the middle will end up going missing. Days later, this person will either be found dead with no injuries whatsoever or in a state of confusion. The person found dead would always end up having their innards missing, as if something reached right through them, took their hearts out and organs without penetrating the skin at all. Very strange. There's also been many stories of hunters waking up, finding the middle person sitting by the campfire, acting very strange. And when I say strange, it is as if this person isn't this person, and something else is trying to mimic this person. The Piñovai creature has been talked about so much in the village that when hunters encounter this kind of situation where one of their own is acting strange around the campfire, or let's say that if one of them goes missing, they will actually know how to react, and this is how they will handle this situation. There are 3 ways hunters will handle this. They will either cook up hot chili peppers, creating this strong pepper smell which will deter the creatures, or reveal it. If you guys have never cooked up pepper in a frying pan, it makes a very strong odor smell. Or the other way is they will actually, believe it or not, pee in the bamboo and boil it over the fire. I'm not even making this up. And the third way is if the hunters knew that this person that was acting strange was not one of their own, they will either tie the person up or in some rare occasions shoot the person right then and there. And majority of the time the creature will then make a horrible screech, jump up and run off into the forest. If that happens, the hunters will then make up these huge torches to go look for the missing individuals. Most of the times that individual is never found. But let's say that they shot this person and it was actually one of their own and they're just acting crazy, then that person has just been charged with murder. There's also many stories out there where hunters will go squirrel hunting in the forest, and when they go shoot the squirrel, by the time they go to retrieve it, they find something else like a monkey. So them being hungry, they gotta bring something back home to their family to eat. They'll actually pick up the monkey, put it on their backs, and make the trek back home. And once when they get done cooking it, everybody who ate that monkey or whatever he brought back home will start puking blood and die mysteriously. And when this happens, they chalk this up to be the Piñovai, because the Piñovai is known to be a creature that eats your innards, and that's all they like eating. And the theory behind this is that if you eat the Piñovai and it's inside of you, it will start eating you from the inside out. That is why my parents and all the elders in our culture have said that if you shot something out in the forest and you suspect this to be a Piñovai, let's say if I shot a squirrel and turned out to be a monkey, here in the United States we don't have monkeys, so that won't be a problem at all. But back in Laos they said that if you shot a squirrel and it turned out to be a monkey, and when you take it back home, the monkey is just pretending to be dead, but when you do start cooking it or start chopping it up, it will just still remain dead. When you start cooking it up, find the hottest chili pepper you have on hand and cook it with it. That way, when you do eat the Piñovai, it won't eat your innards. It will actually die because of the pepper. Many stories like this revolves around the Hmong culture and their folklores about this Piñovai creature. But there's also many rules out there too, like do not whistle at night, because that is like a mating call to attract all these demonic entities like the shadow people, Piñovai, skinwalker, anything like that will actually come to you, especially little people. There's also many rules in the Hmong culture where if you do plan to sleep at night in the jungles or the forest, do not sleep on deer trails or animal trails, as this is not just a trail for animals, because we believe that spiritual entities use these trails as well. And there's also one more where if you actually do plan to sleep in the forest and there's really no good place to sleep at all, don't sleep up in the trees. Find one of the oldest tree. Ask this tree if this tree could protect you from any kind of bad entities that's around the forest. And when you do sleep, sleep right next to it underneath its trunk. But these are some of the superstitions and folklores, especially revolving around the Piñovai creature. And I'm sure there's more stories out there revolving around the Piñovai, but these are some of the main ones. If you ever get a chance to talk to any elders or the older generations of the Hmong culture, they will tell you exactly what I've just told you. And that is why I truly believe that there are 2 different types of Bigfoot out there, even though there are many species across the world. There is one that is physical and one that is spiritual, and the spiritual one is what we call the interdimensional being, just like the Piñovai that my parents and all the elders always talked about. And the physical one, especially back in Laos, is what we call the rock ape. And that is all I have for you guys today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this type of episode where I kind of bring in my culture perspective into the topic of Bigfoot, little people, or, any future cryptids out there that I'll be telling. Remind you this, our parents and the older generations, they came from a third world country where they didn't have internet connection, telling them that there's Bigfoot or anything like that exists out there in the world. And they're telling these stories where they're running into these Bigfoot-like creatures, serpents, and little people without even knowing that there's a Bigfoot out there. And when they came here telling us all these stories during bedtime, I really thought they were just bedtime stories. And while growing up, hearing the stories about the modern day Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, big serpents, you name it, all the cryptids out there, I mean, comparing those stories to the stories that my parents told me during bedtime, I'm just like, holy crap, there's so many similarities between these stories. And when I do ask my parents, okay, are these creatures or these cryptids, are they real? They'll come out and say, yeah, they're actually real creatures that we used to encounter back in Laos. And I'm just like, holy crap, I gotta share this to the world. So here I am talking on a mic with everybody on YouTube. But a man by the name of Ronnie LeBlanc had a very strange encounter with a dimensional shifting beast in the woods when he was about 12 years old. And to this day, he is convinced that Bigfoot is more than just a flesh and blood animal. In his own words, he said, "There was a particular trail that I've always avoided as a kid. It always had a dark, ominous feeling to it. It would be a beautiful day, and then when you looked down this trail, it looked dark. There were 2 trees on either side, and it just felt like this prehistoric gate welcoming me into this place. As I started going down this trail with my bike, I could hear the bike squealing and noticed that there were no other sounds in the forest. Nothing. No animal, bird, or any signs of life. I was standing there in total silence, there with my feet on the ground, and all of a sudden, something comes crashing through the woods right in front of me, and I could feel the ground vibrate in the sole of my feet. To me, it sounded like an elephant crashing in the woods right near me. It was pushing the trees and shrubs down, went across the trail, and onto the other side, but I couldn't see anything. I was so scared I couldn't move. Once it stopped, I pedaled out of there as fast as I could and never went back." Interestingly enough, according to LeBlanc, there's been numerous reports of people having similar or hearing something large crashing through the trees, or even seeing brush get pushed aside, yet have been unable to see what was causing it. LeBlanc has theorized that whatever is behind such sightings is perhaps cloaking itself, or can dematerialize at will, or passing through portals between 2 different realities. This theory would perhaps point to Bigfoot being something more than a large, undiscovered biological entity. LeBlanc would then say, "I would say Bigfoot is something that's more interdimensional, almost spiritual kind of a realm that has the ability to manifest itself. I started off chasing an ape, a flesh and blood animal, and now I'm thinking something else. As you dig deeper into Bigfoot, you start talking about cloaking and the fact that they can vanish before people's eyes. And these stories go back hundreds of years where all of a sudden, this creature cornered and the track just disappeared in the open field, like something just came out and picked it up and took it away. A lot of people are talking about these similar encounters that I had. So there is a belief that Bigfoot can be alien or interdimensional, and it sounds crazy, like something out of a science fiction movie. But when you think about it, we have this preconceived notion that an alien has to be gray or green. People have seen Bigfoot holding an orb. They look like a basketball with the plasma swirling around it, and they're silent. I've just seen them hovering over the skies and just blanked out and disappear. There are a lot of different theories about Bigfoot, but the reality is something is happening. People are seeing them. They are leaving tracks. According to LeBlanc, the area has been a hotspot of Bigfoot sightings going all the way back to 1884, with earlier settlers even complaining that the creature would attack and kill their livestock, as well as reports from various other strange phenomenons such as UFO, shadow people, strange beings, and balls of light. And there are quite a few reports along the lines of an apparent Bigfoot just blinking out of existence.
I don't know what the hell that is. That could be a video distortion or something, but to me, I think we just captured a cloaked Bigfoot.
Well, let me share with you some of the stories about this cloaking Bigfoot before we get to some of the accounts. The legends and reports of a cloaking Bigfoot have said to roam the vast land and forests of North America and Canada. In the dense, untouched forests of the Pacific Northwest, a legend whispered among the trees, a tale that sent shivers down the spine of those who dare venture deep into the wilderness. It spoke of a creature, a massive and elusive being known as the cloaking Bigfoot. Without further ado, let's begin. So in the heart of the wilderness in North America, where ancient trees whisper tales of time long past, a story etched into folklore of Native American people. This tale speaks of a mysterious and elusive being known as the Buckwas. The Buckwas, also known as the Wild Man of the Woods, is a supernatural ghost-like figure. He is associated with the spirits of people who have drowned, and he lives in an invisible house in the forest and attracts the spirit of those who have drowned to his home. Generations of indigenous tribes have passed down the accounts of their encounters with this creature that seemingly mends with the natural world, a guardian spirit of the untamed wilderness. So many moons ago, as the story is told, a tribe ventured into the dense untouched forest for a sacred ceremony, seeking the blessing of the spirits that reside within the ancient trees. As night fell and the beats of the drums echoed throughout the forest, the tribe felt an unusual presence as the forest went silent. There was a subtle shift in the air that raised the hair on their necks. As the tribe gathered around the flickering firelight, a figure emerged from the shadows. Towering and covered in fur, the Buckwas revealed itself to the astonished onlookers. Yet it was not the creature's massive stature that left the tribes in awe. It was the way that it seemingly blended with the surroundings as it was becoming one with the very essence of the forest. The tribal elders, wise and attuned to the natural world, recognized the Buckwas as a guardian spirit, a protector of the sacred land they held dear. It was reported that the creature moved gracefully throughout the moonlight night, its form shifting between visibility and invisibility, leaving the tribe in a state of reverence and wonder. In the days that followed, the Buckwas continued to watch over the tribe from the shadows, mainly from the edge of the woods. It became a symbol of delicate balance between humanity and nature, a reminder that the spirit of the wilderness were both majestic and elusive. The tribes in turn honored the Buckwas in their rituals, acknowledging its presence as a guardian of the ancient untouched land. To this day, the story of Native Americans encountering with the Buckwas is shared around campfires, a reminder that the mysterious of the wilderness runs deep and that there are beings, seen and unseen, who call the vast expanse of North America home. So if I didn't make this clear, Buckwas is another name for Bigfoot, like Sasquatch. And the Buckwas was also known to be kind of this physical creature and this interdimensional being creature that can move from dimension to another dimension. That's why they're called interdimensional beings. As crazy as this sounds, the first account came from seasoned hunters and hikers. The stories that were told were kind of hushed around campfires. They spoke of a otherworldly figure, a giant covered in fur that could vanish into thin air. Many Bigfooters and skeptics dismiss it as a mere fantasy, the product of overreacted imaginations filled by being isolated in the wilderness or the wild. However, those who had experienced the eerie presence of the cloaking Bigfoot swore by their accounts and reports. Now let's get to some of the videos that were recorded and posted online for the world to see. But after viewing all these clips, let me know what you guys think in the comment section.
I look and I'm thinking, what is this thing in the trees? It looked like a large piece of saran wrap. It's the only way I can describe it. But this thing was very wide. So I'm up 14 foot and it hung quite a ways down till it moved and formed the arm that reached over to the other tree. It reached over about 12 to 14 foot and then it all like a blob like sucked into it.
something hard and fast.
For any amount of time.
The heck was that? Did you see that?
It's like a thrust and not a hang, you know what
Yeah,
I'm saying?
something hard and fast.
For any amount of time.
The heck was that? Did you see that?
It's like a thrust and not a hang, you know what I'm
Yeah,
saying?
something hard and fast.
For any amount of...
Do you see that? Over there, look, over there. Do you see that?
What the hell?
Wait, because that was it again, right there. Wait.
I don't like this.
You see that? Right there. Look.
Oh my God. That's not an animal. I don't like this.
Okay, fuck. Go.
And I know exactly what you guys are thinking. Wow, a lot of these videos were recorded with the potato. And it reminds you of the Predator, because for me, it reminds me of the Predator. And there's a lot of theories on these, cloaking Bigfoots to be aliens or walking through portal, but I'm not going to get into those details right now. But I'd love to hear your opinions about the cloaked Bigfoot. Whether you experience something like this or flat out don't believe it, put a comment down below. I would love to read it. Next on the list, we are going to be visiting the Dyatlev's Pass case. For those of you who don't know about this incident, on January 27, 1959, 10 students from the Euro Polytechnic Institution went on a 14-day expedition in the Ural Mountains located in the middle of Soviet Union. Most of these classmates were downhill skiers and cross-country skiers. During the expedition, one of the 10 classmates decided he wasn't feeling good, so decided to return. That decision alone saved his life because he will never see his classmates alive ever again. When the group didn't return on their expected date, the village sent out some search and rescue team to go look for them. On February 26, they found the group's tent badly damaged on the slopes of what they call Death Mountain, and what was strange was the group's belongings had been left behind. Further down the mountain, beneath an old Siberian cedar tree, the search and rescue team found 2 bodies only wearing their socks and underwears. Further down more, they found 3 other bodies that were between a tree and the tent site. 2 months later, the remaining 4 bodies were discovered in a ravine between a thick layer of snow. What was strange was several of the deceased bodies had serious injuries such as fracture to the chest and skull. A few of these bodies were even missing their tongue. The Soviet authorities investigated and determined the causes of these deaths, concluding that the compelling nature forces of avalanches and snowstorms were the cause of the deaths of the hikers. But others have different theories. They blame it on the murderous Yeti that roams the area of Death Mountain. But on the night of the tragedy, one of the most important contribution factors was the presence of the katabatic winds. Winds that carry air down a slope under the force of gravity. These winds are so strong that it could carry and transport the snow, which would have been accumulated uphill from the tent, that would have came down the terrain and hit the team members when they were well unaware of. So for the 2 people that were found without their clothes on, except for their socks and underwear, it is said that when you have hypothermia, you will feel very hot inside, thus taking off all your clothes, unaware of the risk that you put yourself in that cold of an environment. Even with the authorities stating that they have solved this mystery of the 9 hiker at the Dyatlev's Pass, but to many who still believes this was a Yeti attack, there's a lot of strange occurrences during that time that didn't make sense to investigators. For example, why did the hikers cut themselves out of their own tent? And why did they leave a freshly meal perfectly laid out and ready to eat? And most of them left their tent without any winter jackets at all, despite being negative 13 degrees. And the bodies with broken ribs had none of the damage to the soft tissue. That goes along with even a blunt force impact to the body. Their injuries were pretty much consistent with crushing. There were even some of the hikers that were missing their eyes and tongues, which was very strange. What is more strange of all is some of the hikers' clothes were radioactive. There was even a theory stating that it was a government experience gone wrong, and blaming it on the Yeti. During this incident, strange orbs of light were also seen above this mountain. But of course, out of all these theories, two most popular theories are Yeti attacks and alien encounter. So the Yeti is an ape-like creature, usually all white, that inhabits the Himalayan mountain in Asia and the Ural Mountains in Russia. In Western popular culture, the creature is commonly referred as to the abominable snowman. The Yeti has been portrayed as a nice fluffy character in Monsters Inc. and in Disney movies, but here are just some violent encounters that has been reported in Russia. In 1925, a Russian military expedition was reported being attacked by a Yeti in eastern Siberia. In 1945, Soviet soldiers have claimed to have a violent encounter with a Yeti in a cave. In 1953, a group of hunters narrowly escaped a Yeti attack while shooting caribous. With over hundreds of reports of Yeti, these are only a few instances where Yetis were known to attack. And for those 9 hikers that went on the expedition that perished, could it really be a Yeti attack? Even though there are a lot of theories out there, nobody will ever know the truth of what happened to those 9 hikers. Next, we'll be heading into Russia. So in 1925, while pursuing soldiers of the ousted White Russian Army, a relentless Red Army troop searched the rugged terrain, hearing tales of a beast man who lived in the high reaches of the soaring Vanch Mountains. They then came upon a cave that looked to be like a stronghold that the White Army was hiding in. The commanding officer for the Red Army troops then ordered his men to open fire into the cave's opening, and to their surprise, a wild hairy creature ran out from the caves crying wildly into the hail of bullets. And as this creature fell to the ground mortally wounded, as they were all standing there in disbelief, several minutes has passed before the officer and his troops approached the beast, while it lay there sprawled out in the dirt before them, lifeless. While staring down the creature, the officer, or also known as General Mikhail Stefanovic, thought that at first it was an ape. In his own words, quote unquote, it was covered with fur, but I knew there was no apes in the Palmiers. And moreover, the body looked far more human than ape-like, indeed fully human. There was also a lot more reports written about this creature, saying that it was a male about 2 meters tall, 6 foot 7 inches, covered with dark hair, but the face was dark, distinctly ape-like. The entire troop also stated in the briefings that when the beast ran out from the mouth of the cave, it did so on 2 feet, upright, dazed, terrified, and fatally injured. Others even said that the creature appeared to be in an obvious confused state of pain as it fell. But the briefing that goes into a lot more details states the corpse of a male was about 5.5 feet long, covered with dense grayish brown hair except for the face, ears, palms, knees, feet, and buttocks. There were shaggy hairs on the upper lip. The skins on the hands, knees, and feet was thickly calluses. The face was dark with dark eyes, a heavy and a massive lower jaw. Although the teeth were quite large, they seemed to be those of a human. The creature had a broad, unusual muscular chest, but otherwise its torso was much more like a man. Also, the body itself looked very much of that like a man. We tried pulling the hair to see if it was just an hide used for disguise, but found that it was the creature's own natural hair. We turned the body over several times on its back and its front and measured it. The creature that they shot is what we know today as the Yeti. In 1942 and 1943, the Solomon Islands experienced some of the fiercest fightings during World War II and are most famous for the bloody Battle of Guadalcanal. However, Japanese forces had more content with than Allied soldiers on the Solomon Islands. While Japanese troops made their way throughout the remote island's thick rainforests, the soldiers often report coming across giant, hairy hominids ranging from 10 to 15 feet in height, covered in long brown reddish-brown hair with prominent browns, flat noses, and wide mouths. The creatures had immense arms and were known on occasion to carry even weapons such as clubs. It was reported that the giants were known to be quite aggressive and even attacked on occasion. Several units described these terrifying beasts crashing through foliage to ravage squads of soldiers, or even snapping apart trees and branches in threatening display of power. Bullets were said to have little effects on them, and the soldiers would be kept up all night by inhuman wailing from the dark as the strange creatures wandered the night. Of course, the Solomon Islands have a long history of mysterious giants, and the local people are well aware of them. There's also a really rich tradition of folklores, as well as sightings and footprint evidence of giant hairy hominids on the island that continue right up to this present day. So the famous question is, what exactly are these creatures? That question until this day is still unknown, but the belief in their existence is strong across the world. Are they a relic human species, completely unknown ape-like creature, or something else altogether? Our journey starts off back in 2002, where the tales of the Green Berets were dispatched to locate a vanished team in the treacherous mountains of Kandahar, Afghanistan. Initially suspecting an enemy ambush, their investigation took a perplexing turn for the worse. While this team of Green Berets walk up a goat trail up in the Kandahar Mountains, the eerie scene revealed bones, torn clothing, and pieces of military equipment scattered throughout the trail, which was suspected to belong to this missing unit. As they walked up this goat trail and advanced higher into the Kandahar Mountains, they came upon these huge cluster of cave systems. And as the team explored the mouth of one of these cave entrances, they noticed that once when they entered, the cave just drops right off into the dark abyss. As the team decided it was too dangerous to explore any further, they decided to take positions right outside the cave entrance. And a few moments later, out of nowhere, a huge spear hurls towards them from the shadows of one of these cave entrances, where it hit one of the members. Then suddenly outbursts this giant that wore animal clothing and had red hair and blue skin. This giant then ran towards the direction where he threw his spear to more than likely grab it and reuse it again. As this was happening, everyone just stood there in shock, just processing what the heck they were seeing. After a few seconds, they realized what just happened. They then opened fire, killing the giant then and there.
What the hell was that?
After this whole crazy ordeal that just happened, they want to go check up on their member, that one Green Beret that got hit with the spear, to find out that he actually died from his injuries. Shortly after, the team radios back to base, telling them exactly what just happened. The giant's body then was airlifted to secrecy, leaving the witness grappling with the reality of their encounter. As it was reported, this giant was at least 13 feet tall, had 6 fingers on each hands and toes, had red hair, blue skin, and weighed nearly 1,200 pounds. The Green Berets that encountered this giant had to swear to secrecy and even had to change their reports. The most crazy thing about the story was, before the story actually surfaced, the local tribes knew about the Kandahar giants. In Afghanistan, they tell the troops of sightings that there were ongoing and always fear of having their women and children taken away by these giants that live in the Kandahar Mountains. And further adding to the story of red-haired giants, local folklores around that region spoke of trapping giants with blue skin and red hair, especially in caves. Now let's get a little bit deeper than that. Some even claim archaeologists swore to secrecy, later discovering giant remains in the very cave systems that these legends spoke of. Similar tales echoes across cultures, including Norse lore, revealing a concealing world of giants hidden from the public knowledge. I know that our ancestors, far from naive, possess awareness of creatures we now consider mythical. So the veil of secrecy surrounding these encounters hints at hidden truths, I believe. Perhaps to shield the public away from unsettling revelations, I don't know. Could these mythical beings still lurk in the shadows, evading our awareness for their survival? Maybe. And if there are giants out there, I believe Afghanistan will be the perfect place for them, especially with all the cave systems. Let's move on. In 2014, the Ambrose Creek Saddle area of Montana, where a mystery deepens with accounts of 3 individuals meeting untimely fates. A logger found gruesomely torn apart, a trail jogger found a distance away from the trail at the foot of a cliff, and a wildlife biologist sent to investigate, never to return. It was reported by locals who lived near the area of Ambrose Creek Saddle that they seen a Black Hawk helicopter circling the sky, Then what sounds to be like gunfire erupted, and with the area being closed for a certain amount of time, only intensified the mystery and speculation. Many have speculated that the suspect was an aggressive Bigfoot. And just in that area alone of Ambrose Creek, there's actually a lot of reports of people seeing Bigfoot or multiple Bigfoots, and the locals truly do believe that there is a creature that roams their forests up in the mountains. Montana ranks number 31st for Bigfoot sightings in the United States alone, with 47 sightings of the 5,251 sightings in the database of the BFRO. Rumor has it that the military sent a special unit that could operate on US soil to go hunt this creature that was actually killing people in the Ambrose Creek area.
Come on in, you fuckers. Come on in. Old Painless is waiting.
This isn't the first time that I heard such a story. There was another story out there that claimed Navy SEALs went into North Carolina to hunt an aggressive Bigfoot in the Blue Ridge and Great Smoky Mountains. My question with that is, why would they send the Navy SEAL to do that kind of job when there's other units stationed at the North Carolina Army base? Whether these stories are true or not, they are still very fascinating to hear about. According to local legends, the New Zealand Bigfoot is also known as the moihau, a creature said to inhabit the dense forests of the Coromandel Peninsula. Those who have seen this creature has reported to be at least 8 feet tall, with long shaggy hair with a powerful build. People has also claimed to have heard this creature howling throughout the night, sending chills down their spine. But for those who fear this creature, legend has spoke of his friendly nature, telling tales of the moihau, helping lost travelers find their way back and protecting the forest from harm. The Maori people would share stories around campfires about the benevolent guardian of the Coromandels. And how the story was told was a curious child named Kahu decided to venture into the heart of the forest to see if the moihau was real. Armed with courage and a sense of adventure, Kahu embarked on a journey through the towering trees and trickling streams. As Kahu ventured deeper into the forest, the air became thick with mystery. Suddenly, the sound of rustling leaves and gentle footsteps reached Kahu's ears. There, standing in the trees, was a moihau, a towering figure with kind and understanding eyes. To Kahu's surprise, the moihau didn't shy away. Instead, it extended its massive hand in friendship. The two formed an unlikely bond, with the moihau guiding Kahu throughout the forest, revealing its hidden wonders. Shortly after, words of Kahu's extraordinary friendship with the moihau spread throughout the local community. Moihau then became a symbol of harmony between humans and nature, reminding everyone that the importance of preservation of the magical world that surrounds them. And so, the legend of the moihau lived on, not as a fearsome creature of the woods, but as a guardian spirit watching over the Coromandel Peninsula and inspiring generations to come to appreciate the beauty of the natural world. So the Native Americans in the United States, some of them have also talked about this creature being the guardian of the forest. And some even talked about this creature kidnapping children and women. The more I look into this subject, the more I think there's so much more different types of Bigfoots out there in the world. So looking at a lot of these encounters by regions, a lot of these Bigfoots that report to be a lot more aggressive are usually in the colder northern region of the world. So for example, like British Columbia in Canada, there's been sightings of these Bigfoots and they're known to be at least 8 to 12 feet tall and also opportunistic eaters. So being an opportunistic eater, if I have a chance to eat you, I probably would.
The same. Yeah.
Now let's talk a little bit about the Moros, also known as the wild man of Maori mythologies. Before I get into the fascinating stories about the Mero people, I just want to tell you a little bit about the Maori. So the Maori people are the indigenous Polynesian inhabitants of New Zealand. They arrived in New Zealand from eastern Polynesia in several waves of canoe voyages over several centuries. The first significant migration occurred around the 13th centuries. The Maori have a rich culture, heritage with tradition, language, arts, and folklores that are distinct to their identity. And let's not forget about the traditional Maori war dance or ceremony challenge dance known as the haka. And for those of you who's never seen a haka dance, please go look it up. It is pretty cool and extremely intimidating, and sometimes it'll make you laugh because some of their facial expressions are just so funny. But imagine going up against 20 or 30 people and they start doing the haka dance. You'll be pretty intimidated too. So now let's talk about some of the war stories or folklores, the Maori people going up against the Mero people, or also known as the Wild Man of New Zealand. So the Mero is a creature found in the folklores of the Maori indigenous people. This mythology creature may also be described as a type of wild man, like the Yeti of the Himalayas or the Sasquatch of Native American folklore. But unlike Sasquatch or the Yeti, the Mero are said to actually resemble the average human beings in many aspects. These creatures, however, are larger and stronger than the average human. They do not wear clothes, but are covered in long, shaggy black hair instead, which forms a natural covering over their bodies. Despite the fact that they do not have any clothes, they somehow manage to wield stones, clubs, and demonstrate the ability to actually use tools. So apart from the stone clubs, the Maori people also claim that the Meros use their sharp, knife-like fingernails which grows from their long, spiny fingers as weapons. It is also claimed that the Mero are cannibalism in nature. So according to Maori traditions, the sworn enemy of the Meros were the Maori themselves, who they were almost always at war with at all times. As a result of this never-ending conflict, the Meros were driven further and further into the harshest and the most inhospitable forests on the island of New Zealand. It is in these forests that the Meros continue to live in small numbers. In spite of the tales that the Maoris were always at war with the Meros, there are also some stories in which members of the two groups crossbred, resulting in offsprings who are larger in size and strength than the average Maori. So the first one we talked about was the moihau, which was a Bigfoot-like creature. The second one is the Mero, which is more of a wild man to say. Many reports have said that these two are the same creatures, but just hearing tales and folklores from two different perspectives, I believe these two creatures are actually two different things. Even though the Moros and the moihau's share very similar things, and some Maoris even suggested that the two may be one and the same, the moihau's were actually sighted by gold miners during the 1870s and 1880s. Another sightings of the creature was reported by an Australian tourist in 1969, and with more sightings in the 1972 through 1983. One explanation for this creature was that it is an escaped gorilla, which as a result was an exaggerated report and turned into this monstrous creature. So before Bigfoot gained its popularity in 1967, after the Patterson-Gimlin film that came out, there's been reports of strange noises that came out of the forest from those who lived in the countryside or backpackers camping deep in the backwoods. It's pretty obvious those who live in nature will know what kind of noises animals make. But sometimes people hear vocals and noises that just can't be explained. First on the list, we are going to be listening to one form of communications that is also known as tree knocking. There's been many of these reports of tree knocking throughout the world, and Bigfooters believe that tree knocking is another form of a communications between Bigfoots. Speculation even goes as far as to saying that these Bigfoot use these tree knocks to hunt deers, helping them drive deers to one location. Believe it or not, there has been also reports of people seeing Bigfoots going tree to tree, knocking on these trees to see if they're hollow, and listening inside to see if there's any possum or raccoon living in it. Once they hear what's inside, they will then tear the tree apart, catching their prey and eating it. Down in Florida, there's also been speculations of skunk apes using this technique to find grubs and insects that lives inside. Next on our list, we have the Bigfoot howls, or also known as the Ohio howls. The Ohio Howl was first recorded by Matt Moneymaker in 1994. It was the first well-known moan howl that's ever been captured on audio. This popular recording came from Columbiana County, Ohio, near Wellsville in the Ohio River. These moaning like sirens and howls can be heard occasionally late at night in the fall, echoing off the hills on both sides of the Ohio River. So these moan and howls are known or thought to be large male Sasquatches. Even though these howls are reported across the United States, it is most well known as the Ohio Howls. Next on the list is the Samurai Chatter. So this recording was obtained in the remote parts of the Sierra Nevada mountains in California. So Ron Moorhead can be heard in the foreground shouting to imitate the animal as he tries to encourage the animal to continue making sounds. Here is that audio.
Right there, just see movement right through there.
So this Samurai Chatter, or also known as the Sierra Sounds, was recorded by Ron Moorhead and his buddy Al Berry in 1971. Al Berry was a skeptical reporter that investigated the Bigfoot phenomenon. As they were setting camp for the night somewhere between Lake Tahoe and Yosemite National Park, they woke up to these really bizarre cries, whoops, and just everything that you would want to hear coming out from a Bigfoot. I encourage everybody who's never heard the full audio version of the Sierra Sounds to click in the link in the description box below, because that's where I'll be putting the full video audio version. Believe it or not, the Sierra Sounds are the only Bigfoot recordings that has been scientifically studied, time tested, and accredited as genuine. So there's a lot of credibility behind this. Sound experts even study the audio, and many claim that the human vocal cords can't even produce the noise that was recorded that night. Next on the list, we have the Bigfoot whoops. These whoops were also recorded alongside with the samurai chattering in the Sierra Mountains. To me, that sounds like a big old monkey, but interestingly enough, so primates would use whoopings and howling to protect their territories against other primates, and also they would use it for mating, so quite interesting. So my guess is a lot of these Bigfooters would use these howlings and whoopings to kind of draw out the Bigfoots if they are in the area. And as you watch a lot of these Bigfooters go out, they will use that in tangent with the tree knocks. Next on the list, we have full vocal conversations of Bigfoots communicating with each other. If you were to ask me, man, I would be terrified of the woods after hearing something like that. I'll probably never ever camp ever again or go out fishing alone in the woods ever again if I heard that. But holy crap, that was crazy. But other than that, that vocalization was actually recorded also by Ron Moorhead and Al Berry in their Sierra Sounds Part 3. So I will also attach that down in the description box below. Check that out. It is a wild recording. So these are just some of the examples of Bigfoot vocalizations. But those of you who wants to hear a lot more could just comb through the internet. There's so many of these recordings out there, but I just want to show you some of the most profound, well-known recordings out there, and you know what they are called today. Before I leave you guys, I just want to read Al Berry's journey and how he got these Sierra sounds. For those of you who don't know who Al Berry is, he's the skeptical reporter that went up with Ron Moorhead to the Sierra Mountains hoping to find a hoax, but came back with these crazy recordings that pretty much changed the whole trajectory of proving to the world that Bigfoot might actually exist, even if they didn't catch it on camera, because we all know that Bigfoot is really blurry. But having these recordings solidifies us that there's actually something out in the woods that is making these noises, and even scientists can't explain it. Now let's get into the rabbit hole of what happens around Bigfoot and with Bigfoot sightings. These are just some of the strange things that happens around Bigfoot that I would like to talk about that most people won't. From my previous video of the strange lights in the woods, strange lights in the woods have been seen after Bigfoot sightings, or even reported seeing Bigfoots transform into these lights to kind of move and travel around throughout the forest without being detected.
At least not going with number 2. At least we're gonna have a gun.
I don't know what the hell that thing is, dude. It's not moving.
No, it's not moving.
When I try and zoom in on it, it's just... it's weird.
These lights in the woods have been seen all over the world and has many theories explaining this phenomenon. It is a strange and rare occurrence that only a few people have experienced, usually by those who live out in the wilderness or backpackers camping out deep in the national forest. We're going to dive deep into what some of these theories are and description behind these lights. In the United States, these are often called spook lights, ghost lights, or orbs by paranormal enthusiasts. In European folklore, these lights are said to either be mischievous spirits of the dead or other supernatural beings such as fairies attempting to lead travelers astray. Believe it or not, these lights have also been reported alongside with Bigfoot sightings. We could even go as far back to as when the first sightings were reported by the Native Americans. According to legends, the spook light was first seen by natives along the infamous Trail of Tears in 1836. However, the first official report occurred in 1881 in a publication called the Ozark Spook Lights. Before we dive too deep into these stories, let's just talk about what these lights are. In the United States, these lights in the woods are most commonly known as will-o-the-wisp, wonder lights, balls of light, jack-o'-lantern, spook lights, and ghost lights. All different names, but with the same description of a ball out in the middle of the woods, changing colors. These ghost lights have been seen by travelers at night, often in swamps, but also reported seeing them in graveyards. It looks like a low hovering orb of light, but also have reported to change colors from red, blue, green to yellow. It is known to recede when approached, leading travelers away from safe passages. That is why most Native Americans, if you ask, will tell you do not follow these lights if you do see them in the woods. They will lead you deep into the woods, getting you lost without you finding your way back.
I've wandered everywhere in the forest here all day, and I see every star in the sky. There's no clouds, there's nothing. But this light keeps flashing up in the trees, different areas. It's really weird, and I don't know how to describe it because it keeps flashing in different areas of the trees. No helicopter. Oh, did you see it? Whoa! That looked like it came up from the ground, and now it's flashing, and then it... But you're gonna want... Whoa! Now did you see what I'm talking about? Makes no sound at all. Just random flashing, different areas, and it's a big flash, like a big ball of light. Anyway, my point was this is an area that Travis Walton got abducted in up here near the Mogollon Rim.
I'll talk about some of these reports that have been seen all over the United States, but the three most famous ones is one called the Hornet Spook Light, also known as the Devil's Promenade, located northeast of Oklahoma. That light has been seen for more than a century, often described as an orange ball of light that travels east to west along a 4-mile dirt road. It has been seen by locals for decades and also known as the Devil's Promenade. Many explanations have been presented over the years, including escape, natural gas, reflected car lights and billboards, and will-o-wisp, a luminescence created by rotting organic matter. However, all the explanations fall short of being conclusive. Although many paranormal investigators and scientific investigators have studied the light, including the Army Corps of Engineers, no one has been able to provide a conclusive answer to its origin of the light. Next on our list is the Marfa lights, also known as the Marfa ghost lights. You can see these lights in Marfa, Texas in the United States, just east of Mitchell Flats on Route 67. Marfa, Texas has gained its popularity and fame throughout the decades as paranormal investigators and onlookers have flocked to this area to see this phenomenon.
The Marfa Chamber of Commerce president says this isn't a publicity stunt to boost tourism in the town. Scientists and mystery solvers have been unable to explain the hue of flickering lights.
Basically, I like the folklore aspect of it, and that is it's the Mescalero Apache chief Alzate looking for his tribe. That's the explanation.
Kind of romantic anyway.
It's romantic. That's the real explanation. It's Alzate. Very inexplicable.
Don't know what they are.
Don't know what they are, but something's out there on the Mitchell Flat.
Onlookers have attributed their sightings such as ghosts, UFOs, or will-o-the-wisps. But scientists, researchers suggest that most, if not all, just like before, are just atmospheric reflection, automobile headlights, or campfire, very inclusive to the answer of the origin of the light. The Marfa lights has been seen since the 19th century and is still continuing to this day. So those of you who are going to be in Texas that want to see some spook lights, this would be a great place to view them. Last on the list for me is going to be the Pondings light. Pondings light, I have seen this one personally and have visited this one, and you can see this almost every single night when the sun is setting. The Ponding light, also called Lights of Ponding or the Dog Meadows lights, is a light that appears in the valley outside of Ponding, Michigan. Reports of this light has appeared since the 1960s, with the popular folklore providing such explanation as a ghost, geological activity, or swamp gas. The first recording sightings of the Pondings light was in 1966 when a group of teenagers reported the light to a local sheriff's office. Since then, people around Pondings have reported seeing this light almost every night at the site. Throughout the years, there's been many theories and folklore surrounding this phenomenon, but the most popular legends involves a death of a railroad brakeman. The legend states that the valley once contained a railroad track and the light is a lantern of a brakeman who was killed while attempting to stop an oncoming train from colliding with railroad cars stopped on the tracks. Another story claims that the light is the ghost of a slain mail carrier, while another says that it is the ghost of a Native American dancing on the power lines that runs to the valley. Pondings light even gained more popularity when at one point in time, Ripley's Believe It or Not offer $100,000 to anybody who could solve this mystery. In 2010, Michigan Tech students conducted a scientific investigation of the light, were able to see automotive headlights and taillights when viewing them through a telescope. They even recreated the effect of the light by driving a car through a specific stretch of US Highway 45. These tech students might have just solved one of the greatest mysteries in Pondings, Michigan. But even with all these findings, people will still rather believe that this is just some paranormal event that happens every single night in Pondings, Michigan.
We've been measuring the distances between the appearances and disappearances of the cars, and we've been taking video of it as well.
Hey, how are we going to do this? We sit around, we talk about how might we use a spectrometer to measure the spectrum of the Ponding light. How can we apply statistics to make to derive or to show some sort of relationship between the Ponding light and what we believe to be the source of it, which is cars. A lot of people had postulated that it was car headlights, but no one provided any proof, at least not proof that satisfied anyone. And there was a lot of contradictory evidence. The original legend was that
It was somebody who had been killed by a train conductor, and it was his lantern that was swinging. And then it kind of morphed into, it was a bar fight between a train conductor and somebody who was involved with the wife of somebody else, with a lumberjack or something like that, right? Even locals know there is no train. There has been no train. This is not. If you look at the grade here, no one would ever put a train down this stretch of road, at least not in this direction. Because that's actually a question that I had actually after going through my research. How is it that you can actually see the light from this distance, over 6 or 7 miles? It should be just a blur off in the distance. Given what I know about turbulence, it actually shouldn't be that you can see it as clearly as you can. You're staring out the woods here, and when it gets dark, it's black. It's pitch black. There's nothing there. There's no point of reference. You see a light, and the light is actually moving. And if you look through the telescope, you can see the light moving up the road, and then it stays steady on that long, flat piece of road for a long time. That small movement, coupled especially coupled with turbulence, which can cause a tilt effect, it's just like the twinkling of the stars, except, of course, you're dealing with something that's actually larger and closer to you.
These are just 3 locations of some of the most famous lights throughout America where you can view them on a daily basis. There are many more places like this out there. Here are just some more of those locations for those of you who want to see these spook lights. In Bengal, state of India, you have the Alea lights. Blue Ridge Parkway in North Carolina, you have the Brown Mountain lights. West Point, Virginia, you have the Chahokee lights. In Gujarat, state of India, you have the Chirbatis. In rural central Norway, you have the Hesdalen lights. From the big thickets regions of southeast Texas, United States, you have the lights of Saratoga. North Carolina, the Mako lights. Reported outback in Australia, you have the Min lights. Another really famous phenomenon is the Naga fireballs, a phenomenon said to be seen annually on the Mekong River. The US Route 66, the Spook Lights. Saskatchewan, Canada, St. Louis Lights. Last but not least, the Golden Lights located near a railroad track in Arkansas, USA. These are just some of the lights that you can see on a daily basis when the sun is setting or when night falls. Now let's talk about a different light phenomenon that gets even more strange. These lights that I'll be talking about is some of the strangest lights that people have reported in the woods. So for a car to pass by or a reflective of light, it doesn't make sense if it's deep in the woods covered with trees. These lights are the lights that turns red, blue, green, yellow. They tend to dance around and seem to have some sort of intelligence. These lights are usually seen after a Bigfoot sighting or have been reported seen alongside with Bigfoot. So it will get even stranger from here on. So for those of you who love strange things, carry on.
Maybe somebody can tell me what this is.
Because we are going to get into the rabbit hole. So the reason why this topic intrigues me so much is because back in the days before going to bed, my father will always tell us about the spook lights that they seen in Laos. So back in Laos, before coming to America, my dad and his village, they live in a valley deep in the woods. So in between Bigfoot stories and in between all these crazy stories that he will always tell us, he will always mention that, hey, if you ever see these lights in the woods that just kind of twinkles around, there'll be a bunch of them, 3, 4, 5 of them in the woods. They'll look extremely pretty and extremely bright, but he says that if you ever see those in the woods, do not follow them, because they will lead you deep in the woods and they will take you with them, or else they will end up getting you lost to the point where you can't find your way back. It is a theory that dates all the way back to 1973, where more Bigfoot hunters are running into more of these orange orbs, or also known as wonder lights. Those are the fast-moving lights that one may think that are alien in nature, but seen in areas associated with Bigfoot. There's been so many reports of these Bigfoots appearing and then disappearing out of nowhere. There was even one incident on the Skinwalker Ranch where a bunch of scientists followed tracks of a big humanoid creature all the way to a clearing field. They followed tracks all the way to the middle, and the tracks simply just vanished out of thin air as if the creature walked through a portal or something. With all these accounts and the mystery orbs as transporting beams for Sasquatch, or Sasquatch just simply walking through portals, isn't really bizarre when all these cases come together and talks about the same thing. So what I'm trying to say is, growing up there's always stories about two different Bigfoot. One was a physical being, just like an ape-man-like creature, and the other one was a magical being that was more of an interdimensional traveler. That is why most of these accounts of people seeing Bigfoot hide behind trees, and when they go take a look behind the tree, they don't see anything at all. The creature just simply vanished in thin air, which is extremely strange. Aside from that, these creatures have also been known to have red glowing eyes, yellow, green, you name it, all these colors. People have seen them. And when I say glowing, I mean glowing, because eye shine, how eye shine occurs is when light enters and passes through the rods and the cones of the retina, striking a special membrane behind the retina, and then is reflected back through the eye to the light source, making the animals see in the dark. But this wasn't the case with this creature. Reports have said these eyes will glow like coals of fire in the pitch black dark of night. Wherever Bigfoot sighting happens, you will always see more paranormal things happen around it. It seems like a force field that attracts all these cryptids together, where demonic spirits have been seen, wolf-like creature have been seen, Bigfoot and lights in the woods, along with poltergeist activities. Next time when you see a Bigfoot hunter, ask him this simple question: what else do you see in the woods besides Bigfoot? What else do you hear in the woods besides Bigfoot? They would tell you they see shadow people, they see demonic stuff. A lot of paranormal things happen when people go searching for Bigfoot. These are some of the things that Bigfooters do not like talking about. There's even been reports of what they call the predator, which is a cloaking Bigfoot. And when I say predator and cloaking, I really mean it. People have seen silhouettes of these huge giant creatures cloaking in the forest, where they could just make an outline of them while they're moving through the forest, but they could see right through them, being transparent. There's even been talks of Bigfoots being aliens coming from spacecrafts, because most of these UFO sightings happens also where Bigfoots have been seen. One of the most famous research out there happens on Skinwalker Ranch. Skinwalker Ranch, also known as the Sherman Ranch, sits on 512 acres, located southeast of Ballard, Utah. This site has everything from paranormal, UFO, Bigfoot sightings, poltergeists, and the name Skinwalker Ranch, or Skinwalker, comes from the Navajo legends concerning that vengeful shamans curse the land to anybody who lives on it. It is a story straight out of a Hollywood movie, where a billionaire buys a plot of land and hires some of the best scientists in the world to come study all these paranormal events that happens on Skinwalker Ranch. There's so much things that happen on this ranch that I'm not going to get into, but the theory and the talks about Bigfoot walking through portals or simply vanish out of thin air when they're following their foot tracks all happens on this ranch that are well documented by scientists. There's a lot of Bigfooters out there that just wants Bigfoot to be this animal-like creature roaming through the woods, but don't want to acknowledge the strange things that happens around Bigfoot, or the unexplainable disappearance of people. A lot of people want Bigfoot to be this hairy, nice creature that is shy and hides behind a tree. But all the stories that my father has told me growing up has been the opposite. And the analogy that I like to use is there are bad and there are good people out there in the world. I believe it's the same thing for these Bigfoots. But that is all I have for you guys for today. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this 1 hour special of my Bigfoot series. And hopefully I'll see you guys again on the next episode of Late Night Strange. Goodbye guys, and stay strange.